Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited to see you and to work with you today. So first, we're going to do an exercise called opening lines. And this is just to warm up your muscles, your writing muscles, and your creative brain. So we would like to see if you can use stakes and tension to set up the delivery of the unexpected and to write a 6-word headline. So choose one of the following subjects for your 6-word headline and then type what you come up with in the chat. So you can write about overcoming an obstacle, dealing with an ethical dilemma, a passion, hobby, or talent, an accomplishment, a social justice cause, or an example of your activism. So here are some examples that have stakes and tension in them. LGBTQ plus youth TikTok craze goes viral. Teen writer publishes CRT WAPO editorial, WAPO's Washington Post. CRT is critical race theory. Climate activist leads Bronx community protest. Teen zine anthology published by Scholastic. Houseless youth accepted into 5 Ivies. So I hope you get the gist, okay? So you want to begin with a detail, something either strange or mundane, or it can be ordinary or extraordinary. And then a great headline is made by grabbing the reader with ultra-specific nouns and verbs to entice them into reading more. So we'll give you maybe 5 minutes to write that. So let's move on to the next thing, which is what makes a great personal statement. Okay, so we have some things for you to think about and some questions to jog or to stimulate your critical thinking and your creativity and to get you thinking about yourself, okay? So this is a time where you do want to write about yourself and to write about your genuine self. If there's one thing we want you to take away from our time together today is to be your genuine self. And you are a unique individual. You are made up of your experiences and circumstances, and only you have those special, unique qualities. So you want your personal statement to sound like you, to sound as if you are the only person who can write it, not everybody in your class, not everybody in your family, not everybody in your community, but it's something that comes specifically from you, okay? So here are some of the things we want you to think about. What contributions will you make to your college or graduate school community? Okay. What story isn't told by the rest of your application? How or why are you memorable? When you leave your community, school, family, what hole will you leave? This could be the subject of a college or graduate school application essay. How is your point of view fresh, unique, original? And when you're writing about a big topic, such as overturning Roe v. Wade, Black Lives Matter, climate change, focus on your specific point of view, your specific details and experiences. You don't want to talk about any topic in a general way, because then it will sound as if anybody could have written it, where you want the admissions committee to learn about you as a person. And this is a wonderful opportunity to provide context and information about you that the admissions committee won't see anywhere else in your application packet. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here are the questions that I just read out for you. And we can go to the next slide. If you're applying to college, to an undergraduate college or university, you will be using what is called the Common Application. And the Common Application has 7 questions. So there are 7 possible personal statement topics, and I'm going to read through them now for you. And then hang on, folks who are applying to grad school, we have a prompt for you too, okay? So people who are applying to undergrad, you will write a common application essay. So that's your personal statement. The word limit is 650 words, and you have to answer one of these 7 questions. So there is a minimum of 250 words and then a maximum of 650, okay? So just to give you a sense, 1 page double spaced is about 250 words, all right? So the first prompt is, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful, they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, please share your story. Okay, so prompt number 2. The lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from the experience? Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, great. So the third prompt is, reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking? What was the outcome? The fourth prompt is, describe a problem you've solved or a problem you'd like to solve. It can be an intellectual challenge, a research query, an ethical dilemma, anything that is of personal importance, no matter the scale. Explain its significance to you and what steps you took or could be taken to identify a solution. Okay, next slide, please. Great. So the fifth prompt is, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a period of personal growth and a new understanding of yourself or others. The sixth prompt is, describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose track of time. Why does it captivate you? What or who do you turn to when you want to learn more? Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, and the last prompt is, share an essay on any topic of your choice. It can be one you've already written, one that responds to a different prompt, or one of your own design. So as you can see, you can write about anything for the college common application personal statement. So if none of the 6 appeal to you, you can write about what you want, a topic of your choice. But again, you want the essay, the personal statement, to reveal context about you and what makes you a unique person. And ideally, you want to have material that the admissions committee can't read elsewhere on your application. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here's a tip. So we've heard it from a reliable person who is a guidance counselor, saying that this year, beginning this year, all applicants are asked to share how COVID-19 impacted them in a short essay. So we suggest that you not write about COVID-19 for your personal statement, since you will have to do a short essay about how you were affected by COVID-19. So you don't need to double up and do that for your personal statement. Okay, thanks. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so if you're applying to graduate school, and that would be another degree after you finished your undergrad degree. So if you are getting more specialized training and specialized credentialing, you're applying to graduate school. And for graduate school personal statements, the schools tend to ask for 2 to 4 double-spaced pages, and in which you share your academic and professional goals and the ways in which the program will benefit by bringing you in as a student, okay? All right, so let's go to the next slide, please. Okay, so here are writing tips, elements of your personal statement. Be your authentic self. This is the one time you're expected to talk about yourself, who you are as a person, how your mind works, what kind of people you relate to, what are you afraid of and what do you hope for, what do you believe? Details. Now, what do you notice that probably nobody else notices? A good way to give details in your piece is to use sensory details. So sensory details call up the 5 senses: sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste, and be specific. Dialogue is a great technique to use in your personal essay. It's a way to convey information about the speaker. So what do the people in your narrative sound like? What words or phrases do they use? If there's a catchphrase that someone that you're writing about uses, use that catchphrase because it conveys specific information. Use nouns and verbs over adjectives. You want your reader to know if you want your reader to know your sibling is annoying, don't say they're annoying. Show how they're annoying. What do they do to you? How do they sound? What do they tell you that what do they do that nobody else would be caught dead doing? Actions speak louder than words. Show, don't tell. Okay, the hook. So the hook is a great opener that situates the reader right in the middle of the action. You can use dialogue, proclaim a want, or make a statement. You know, some of the 6-word headlines that you wrote for the workshop, you could use that as your hook. It conveys tension and stakes, and it draws the reader in. So humor. The person reading your essay is probably reading hundreds of essays, and reading something that expresses a unique perspective is refreshing. Humor is a way we connect with each other, especially if it's self-effacing or captures something we feel or think but haven't expressed. Just be careful of offending anyone or saying something for mere shock value in order to stand out. And I think that would go with curse words as well. You know, some people are fine with it, some are not, and it's better not to use a curse word in your writing if it's just being gratuitous, which means you're just using it for shock value. You never want to write anything just for shock value. You want to have a reason for what you're writing, okay? So revision. Remember, great essays and great personal statements are not written in a day. During your writing process, revision is one of the most important tools to use to strengthen your essay. Ideally, you want to revise at least twice. You'll have, you know, just the first draft, which is just getting things onto paper and getting your ideas down. Then you're going to go back and organize your ideas and work on the structure, and maybe what you wrote last in your very first draft then comes up earlier in the essay, in the personal statement. And then after you've gotten the personal statement the way you want it, you want to do another revision, which is doing the polish, where you look for misspellings, you look for maybe punctuation that's not clear, you look for descriptions that maybe could be clearer, and then you fix those up too, all right? So once you think you've finished, revise and revise and revise again. So that's the key, revision. Nobody writes a great statement on the first try. Next, we're going to look at a sample personal statement by Keti. Oh, goodness. Keti Akhalbedashvili, who is a wonderful, wonderful writer with a challenging last name to pronounce. Keti is a wonderful writer. She is currently a new school undergrad. She was a Girls Right Now mentee, and she also won a scholarship to go to the new school. And I really love her essay. So we're going to look at it together. I'm going to read it, and you can read along as I'm reading. And what I want you to think about as I'm reading are the elements that we talked about being in your essay. We talked about standing out by being your true, authentic self, right? We talked about details, dialogue, nouns and verbs over adjectives, the hook, humor. Okay, so as I'm reading, if you notice some of those things, you can type them in the chat. All right. Okay, so here's the personal statement. Now, as you can see, the very first quote is written in a language that is not in English, but the translation Keti has put underneath it. Then he said, "Weep not, my daughter, but hear what I'm about to say. You are a king, named by me, a sovereign today, the knight in a panther's skin." Okay, so that's the title of the piece where that quote comes from. I was only 7 years old when I was gifted my first copy of the epic poem describing the coronation of Tamar, the powerful king of Georgia, who was a woman. Not being able to comprehend medieval Georgian, I would quickly skip through the masterpiece that I then deemed boring and land on an illustration of King Tamar. I studied the piece carefully in awe. Sitting in her marvelous throne, her dress illuminated by precious stones and fabrics, Tamar gazed down as the most respected men of the Georgian intelligentsia bowed down to her. Her ornate dress and intimidating gaze were enough for my 7-year-old self to be enthralled by the king, who never really dethroned from being a subject of my fascination. Years later, having learned to read medieval Georgian, it was not the sparkly jewelry and vibrant dresses that caught my attention, but rather her title that read, "A King." A title that wore down the walls of gender norms, broadening my ideas of what I could achieve as a woman. Without realizing it, I had grown up believing I could be anything, even a king. Let's go to the next slide, please. In most modern languages, the title is associated with a male ruler, but the terminology was not so constricted in medieval Georgian. In order to avoid puzzling readers, however, her title is often translated to Queen Tamar in English. Seeing this interpretation frustrates and saddens me. The meaning behind her title, along with the impact it had on my identity as an ambitious young woman, was lost. Its purpose was to signify the excellence of her reign, not only among female monarchs, but also monarchs in general. I mulled over the pitfalls of adapting cultural references into a different language. Who decides what a text means, and how much can be lost in translations? During March of this year, deep into the hole of boredom and monotony from weeks of quarantine, I visited books that I used to enjoy when I was younger. Particularly sensitive to nostalgia, considering I was deprived of any experience that required stepping out of my apartment, rereading the Odyssey brought up the same questions that bothered me when I first read the book. Stephen King describes the writer-reader relationship as telepathy. We're having a meeting of the minds, he wrote in his memoir on writing. For this reason, I have always prided myself on being a sensitive reader. I admired the bittersweet intimacy between the writer and her audience, with the text providing a bridge, creating a silent conversation from one mind to another. Upon contemplation, I realized I hadn't experienced this intimacy when reading some of the ancient texts that held the most importance to me. I wasn't metaphorically present to Homer's telling of the adventures of Odysseus and Achilles, nor was I connected to Plato as he recited the wisdom shared in the Symposium. Instead, by reading the translator's interpretation of the works, I was seeing them through a filter. I decided that learning to read ancient Greek would be an advantageous use of my time. By the end of the year, the months of struggling to grasp the concept of declensions paid off, as I am now able to translate the myths I so deeply admire. I have come to appreciate translation as a form of art itself, as it is the great conjunction of all that is important to understand a certain culture. The convoluted sentence structure of ancient Greek that once seemed chaotic turned out to be my favorite, yet the most challenging part to interpret. I noticed it highlighted the lyricism of ancient language, something so hard to grasp in modern languages, which are constricted with grammar rules. I came to see this lack of structure as a reflection of their society that valued freedom. I am finally able to grasp the concept of eros, philia, or pragma that would all be under the same label of love in English. Single words such as Panaurios, which invoke an entire myth. These can never have the same significance in English. Ancient linguistics serves as a map to ancient antiquity. Understanding a language opens a gate to a perception of the world that was vastly different from ours. It gives me access to the mind and soul of storytellers. It gives a king her rightful title. Okay, so what did you notice? Maybe we can go to part one, and maybe you could share with me what you noticed about Keti's piece, what you admired, what you noticed in her writing, any of the techniques that we were talking about, having a hook, standing out by being your true authentic self, the details, any dialogue, nouns and verbs over adjectives, any humor. So one of the reasons why I love Keti's essay is that she shows and tells the reader in the piece. So we have showing and telling, right? The showing of medieval Georgian, and then we have the quote, and then beginning with the king, King Tamar, the powerful king of Georgia. And what I love that Keti does is that she uses that tension, right? King who is female, that's also a stake, king who is female. She uses that as the window into writing about gender, writing about how ancient languages did not make that distinction that, our contemporary language makes. She also writes about translation and not having the exact words in one language that are the same as another language, and how she wanted to not have the distance from the original text of having the filter of a translator. So she learned to read the ancient language herself so that she could experience it more deeply. She has so many wonderful, specific details in here. I love that she tells us, she uses the quote from Stephen King. Now, not everybody would associate Stephen King, who writes genre fiction, writes horror and fantasy, with I would not automatically connect him with translation or with an ancient text. But I love the way that she uses the quote from his piece on writing about how readers and writers have a telepathy. I think that's so beautiful. There are just so many wonderful specific details in her piece that I encourage you all have access to the lesson plan. And so you can go back and you can read it on your own and look at it more carefully and notice some of the things that we didn't talk about. I love that she shows the reader what she did during quarantine. All of us were locked up for at least a year during quarantine. I know that my time was not as productive as Keti's, but I love how she created her own project during that time. It really shows a window into her character, which, as Beth had said, persistence, right? Persistence to learn a new language, motivation. She's curious. She wants to figure something out. She can problem solve. When you're doing translation, there's lots of declensions and conjugations in other languages that English does not have. All right, so let's move on to our next section, which is writing time. So now it's time for you to draft your personal statement. You'll have 25 minutes to write. We are going to ask you, if you're applying to college, to choose one of the 7 common application essays. Or something else that speaks to you. And if you're applying to graduate school, we have some things on here for you as well. So the college personal statement prompts are here 1 through 7. And then the graduate school personal statement prompt, I'm just going to read that quickly. What are your academic and professional goals? What experiences and skills will you build on in the program? Share how the program will benefit by welcoming you to their community. How will you make an impact in your community and/or field? Okay, so those are some of the questions you want to address if you're writing a personal statement for graduate school. If you're writing a personal statement for college, you want to answer one of these prompts. But as you know, the 7th prompt is sort of like the magic prompt where you can write about anything that you want. And if you're having a hard time coming up with something, we have a few prompts that I will say now. Do you have an article of clothing that tells a story about you? Is there an object in your life that holds great meaning to you? For you, do you have a favorite book, movie, or poem, artwork, music, or sport? Or how does your favorite film or poem or song convey something specific or meaningful about you? And don't summarize. You want to be specific. Okay, so I think we're going to get started with the writing.
Follow us on social media at Girls Write Now, class of 2023. Thank you. We're grateful. And until next time,